Media personality Tucker Carlson did not mince words while blasting the mainstream media's coverage of the ongoing war in Ukraine. Let's watch the latest episode of Tucker on Twitter.
Pretty much everything that NBC News and the New York Times have told you about the war in Ukraine is a lie. The Russian army is incompetent, they claim. Ukraine is a democracy. Vladimir Putin is Hitler and he's trying to take over the world. Thankfully, the Ukrainians are winning. None of that is true. Every claim is false, the last one especially. The Ukrainian army is not winning. In fact, it's losing badly. Ukraine is being destroyed. Its population is being slaughtered in lopsided battles with a technologically superior enemy, or scattered by the millions to the rest of the globe as refugees. Ukraine is running out of soldiers. As that happens, the question will inevitably arise, who's going to replace them? If the Ukrainians can't beat Putin, who will? The answer, of course, will be us. American troops will fight the Russian army in Eastern Europe. That's most likely. And the assumption is we'll win.
Now, later in the interview, Carlson spoke with retired Army colonel and former advisor to the Trump administration, Douglas Macgregor, about Biden's influence over Ukrainian President Zelensky. Let's listen.
Who is Zelensky? Exactly. How would you characterize Zelensky?
Well, Zelensky...
George W. Bush called him our generation's Winston Churchill.
Well, this is W, right?
Yeah.
Not a very thoughtful man. He was a comedian who made a living acting on stage, frequently pretending to be a transvestite, doing things with various body parts that I won't go into. And he was picked up by an oligarch named Kolomoisky. Kolomoisky is the individual who's probably more responsible than anybody else for funding this atrocity we call the Azov Regiment that runs around with the swastikas and Nazi gear and so forth. And he was picked and then blessed by Victoria Nuland and the State Department as their man. Now, when he originally ran for office, he ran on a peace platform. And he was overwhelmingly elected across the country because he said, if I am elected as your president, I will make peace with Russia. Ukrainians didn't want to go to war with Russia. They were looking for a way out of this and a resolution to the crisis. Of course, once he was in there, he took a different road. And I can't help but think that that road was defined for him by us.
Sounds like Rudy Giuliani and Zelensky have something in common.
Yes, you were alluding. I wrote that same note. We, of course, recall that one time Trump and Rudy Giuliani did a drag skit where Giuliani pretends to be a woman and Trump sticks his face.
Look, Republicans can do the woke wars, but they have to admit at a certain point that everybody loves drag.
It's just funny for people to dress up in women's clothes.
Everybody loves drag.
Funny. It's funny.
Shakespeare loved drag. Everybody loves drag.
South Pacific, hilarious.
Yeah. Anyway,
so let's set that aside. But that's not really the thing to criticize Zelensky for. What is the thing to criticize him for is becoming a mouthpiece of Victoria Nuland, the U.S. State Department, and Macgregor goes into some of the history there. How U.S. foreign policy choices have affected the trajectory of this war. How forged the path that brought us to where we are now, ever since the fall of the Soviet Union with respect to NATO, and that's something that this individual Macgregor has been talking about for a long time. He was a Trump foreign policy advisor, and it shows the difference between what Trump wants to do. Now, of course, was totally unable to grapple with the actual forces of the deep state that continued to have us on the same path, but echoing the desires of actually American people to not have a confrontation with Russia. No one thinks, and maybe they think it privately, even the Biden administration knows we can't have ground troop, right? That we're not going to have actually ground troops fighting Russians.
So I was going to ask
that would be World War III.
So the Pentagon has been very clear that there will be no U.S. combat troops in Ukraine.
Of course, Zelensky wants U.S. combat troops in Ukraine. He wants a no-fly zone. He wants the very conditions that would create World War III.
As of November 1st, Pentagon Press Secretary Brigadier General Pat Ryder told the media that U.S. forces were at the embassy, but that Washington had been very clear that there are no combat forces in Ukraine. No U.S. combat forces would be doing operations in Ukraine. There seems to be some acknowledgement that if there were direct interactions between a NATO country and Russia, then that is what it is. this is a proxy war, not a real war. So what do you then make of McGregor's very confident statement that that is where we are headed?
Well, it better not be the case. And the administration has not said that they would do that. But here's another question. This never comes up, but it would be illegal for the Biden administration to send ground forces to fight Russia because Congress, and not the president, but Congress is the branch that is supposed to declare war. We have not declared war on Russia. It would be an unconstitutional action to do that. Now, do I believe the fact that it's not constitutional would necessarily preclude Biden from doing it? No. Congress has shown no appetite, sadly, for exercising its discretion, its total power, actually, over war declaration. They've just wholesale let the executive do whatever they want, whether it's Biden, whether it's Obama, Bush, Clinton, Reagan, anyone, Nixon, going all the way back to Nixon, and back further. But that is the case. So we can't just have a ground war with Russia without Congress to say so.
So I had forgotten about this. In July, Biden said 3,000 reserve troops can be sent to Europe to support NATO and Ukraine to just demonstrate our commitment to the war, the commitment to the supporting Ukraine side.
All the money and the
war.
cluster bombs and the other arms didn't demonstrate that support.
Yeah, but I can see with statements like that how people can start to be concerned that this is irreducibly where we're going. I do wonder, though, McGregor making such a strong statement like that without offering any support.
Well, and I did see him getting criticism for the casualty numbers estimates he gave, which I was seeing some people, even people who are of our kind of persuasion and thinking about Ukraine, saying that he had gotten those numbers wrong.
Also, McGregor, so I don't mean to be
I'm not co-signing his
overly skeptical, but he is someone who was pro-Afghanistan withdrawal, but also aggressively pro the Iraq war. He is not someone who I would characterize as generally motivated by kind of an anti-war, anti-interventionist approach to things. And so his reasons, I think that you can have reasons for not wanting to be engaged in Ukraine, namely that you are provoking a face-off between two nuclear powers, which is a level of escalation that is not the same in other wars, you could say.
And that there's not enough at stake
the Iraq war or whatever.
That would justify U.S. this portion of Ukraine, whether it's under Russian control, independent Ukraine control, or Ukrainian control, is not a compelling enough U.S. foreign policy interest.
But I would like to hear more from people about why it is, what to them is the line. When this conflict started, when Russia invaded Ukraine, coming to this, not knowing very much as most people I think did about the region, my core question was simply, I acknowledge it's obviously true that Russia is invading illegally. Now, the precipitating events and all of the things, and that is all true, but fundamentally that's illegal and wrong. So there is, I think, in the abstract, a question of what our moral responsibility is, what anybody's moral responsibility is to help someone who is being violated in that way. But my fundamental question was, what is our role as a nation state, not an abstract moral principle, given that there are a lot of very terrible things happening in the world at all times, much loss of life that could be prevented by America's resources all the time, including military conflicts, including droughts, including sanctions, and conflicts that are our doing in the first place. So why are we investing here? And not having gotten a good answer on that, I remain unpersuaded. But I am curious about what sort of things are motivating someone like McGregor, who is not someone who has a generalized anti-war principle. Is it that he thinks that this war just can't be won, which seems right and true, and that it's a waste of resources? Is it that he does have this ideological opposition to Zelensky and the Azov battalion because of the consistent Nazi memorabilia and anti-Semitic views that keep bubbling up there? Is it because he thinks Zelensky is a weak leader who's a fake actor, a failed actor, and shouldn't be followed into war and is a U.S. puppet? It can be a mix of all of these things, but I do wish we would have more of that kind of a conversation so I can have a better sense of where people who frankly don't share my anti-war bona fides are coming from in these kinds of conversations.
Well, it was a long conversation. Viewers can check out the rest of it if they're curious on what else he had to say, and we will have more Rising right after this.